Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is someone I've known for a very long time, and then we kind of lost connection, and then we've reconnected. Tess Wittler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lori, so good to be here. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and how do we originally connected because we were both in a mastermind with Jim Palmer, right?
That is correct.
Jim Palmer, the
correct.
newsletter guru, not Jim Palmer, the baseball player.
Correct. So, yeah, he was really instrumental in connecting us, probably 12 years ago? At least a decade ago.
At least, yeah.
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 It was
Yeah,
fun.
and so much has happened in both of our lives since then. Obviously, I mean, as you would expect
Yeah.
because if you're not growing, you're dying. And both of us have been doing a lot of growing in that time. And we're going to
Yes.
get into that. So, yeah, let's start off with the question of what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you've become?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. I was raised very traditionally. My folks, my dad worked, my mom stayed at home and with the kids and was a housemaker. And I grew up in central Pennsylvania. But, my parents didn't really have a lot. But, what we did have, we made the most of. It was my dad, both my parents actually, were very into family and connections and staying, and we had these crazy Sunday afternoon visits where we'd have to go visit some family member. And as a teenager, that was the thing I absolutely despised the most.
I can imagine.
You gotta be kidding me, Dad. We have to go visit aunt and uncle, whomever. And it wasn't just like his siblings or my grandparents. It was, the great aunt and uncle that we hadn't seen, or some, a cousin, a second cousin or something. Like, he was really big into that. And, my mom was too. My mom was from New Hampshire. My dad was from Pennsylvania. They met when he was in the service. So, of course, when we were in New Hampshire, we did the same thing, but most of my upbringing was in Pennsylvania. And I think that really instilled an awful lot of importance of connection and community. And of course, as a teenager, I certainly did not appreciate it, especially as being the oldest cousin. So, I didn't want to deal with my toddler cousins when I was a teenager. But as I got older, and we lived in Pennsylvania for quite a while, probably I would say until my early 40s. And so we would still go back home to my grandmother's, and my grandmother always had Thanksgiving, and all the cousins would come together, and our spouses were there, and then their kids were there. And, so it became an incredibly important part of who I am, that connection, yes, absolutely family connection, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it was just that sense of home, that sense of belonging, sense of community. It was really instilled in me. And my husband, I know we're not talking about him, but my husband had the same upbringing on here in Washington. And so when we were living in Pennsylvania, that was equally important to him, to make sure that we got together with my dad for brunch, or got to see my grandparents, or, those types of things.
Yeah, well, and I would imagine that that's an important piece of your relationship, is that you have that same value of family is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That whole piece of connection and community and being a part of, that bigger family unit, that was something that all of us cousins, we probably all didn't care for it as a teen or even a young adult. But when my grandmother passed away and it was taken away, we all have commented about how much we missed that, and missed that piece of always going to Graham's for a gathering, or, always spending Thanksgiving there. That was such a big part of I think who we were.
Yeah, and so no one else in the family took over that responsibility?
No, and this is kind of where I'll tell you a little bit of the background of what transpired in a short period of time in my life. I lost my dad, and then I lost we lost 3 parents in 30 months. So I lost my mom, and then I lost my dad, then I lost my mom, and then we lost Jason's mom in a 30 months.
Wow.
So, and then in between that, we lost both grandmothers.
Oh, wow.
So I lost my mom and my grandmother the same week. So I'm on the phone with my mom's hospital trying to figure out what's going on with her, because she was in New Hampshire, and my cousins are trying to call me from Pennsylvania because my grandmother had passed. So it was just a really dark time in our lives. And to answer your question, no one has. The family unit's different now. I'm not saying it's different for all the cousins, but it's definitely different for me and my brother. And and we were living in Virginia at the time, so it was still a 6 or 7 hour drive to go, quote unquote, home for the holidays. So I would certainly be welcome. I have standing invitations with my aunts and my uncles, absolutely. But it's just different when you lose. My dad and my grandmother were such an instrumental part of my life, of our lives, that it's different.
Yeah.
When you lose them back to back.
Right. And in any circumstance, when a parent passes, or a grandparent, or family members that you've been close to, and you have to readjust or adjust in the first place, like, well, what is my life now? And even questioning, like, who am I now?
Yeah.
Because your identity is tied to them, and when they're not still here in physical form, now what?
Right. And no one can prepare you for that loss.
No.
Right?
Not at all.
And you look back and you're like, oh, well, you've had friends, really close friends, or even a cousin or someone who has lost one of their parents. And I was really close to to my uncle and my aunt, and like super close to them, and but they were still my uncle and my aunt.
Right.
And so no one can prepare you for that. So it really does. It makes you kind of sit back, and then I'm sure I'm not the only person who's ever dealt with losses back to back to back, but it was just like, it felt like one gut punch after another, and then when we lost Jason's mom, I was just like, you gotta be shitting me. Like, you just, like, really?
Yeah. Like, how much do you think, universe, God, whatever, can I handle?
Yeah. And it was just like, no disrespect to our grandmothers, but they had lived really, really full and long lives, and they were to the point where they couldn't really enjoy life. So you expect that. You don't expect that when, all 3 of the folks were unexpected. So it was just, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it was just, no one can prepare you for that until you've gone through that. And everyone tells you that.
Right.
And you hear that, and you'll hear this on this podcast if you've not gone through that. But it's a very different look at your life after you're faced with mortality. Like, you're faced with, I'm going to die someday, and what does that look like? And how do I want to live the rest of my life? So that was one of the big questions that we faced, losing our folks.
Yeah. What years was that, or what was the last year that the last one was? Like, how long ago?
Sure. We lost Jason's mom, July 2020.
Okay. So only 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, as you mentioned, and as I've mentioned many times on the show, from my perspective of after my mom passed, of do I want to live the next 20 years the same way I lived the last 20? And you just brought up that same question, like, where do I go from here? Or what do I want to change? And so what is it that, like, what did you go through? What was your thought process, or what was the process I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but what did you go through to, reevaluate? What did that look like for you?
Sure. So, it was during COVID. So, of course we were locked down. Let's
have an extra layer of complexity to it.
Right. So, and at the time, life had taken us to Richmond, Virginia. We were there for Jason's job. He was in the horse racing industry, the business side of horse racing. And so we were there for that, and we were still, 6 or 7 hours away from Pennsylvania. And I think, when after all of those, after we came up for air from all of that grief, and then we were able to actually do things because, COVID allowed us, the pandemic slowly allowed us to do a few things. I think we really just looked at it as we're going to enjoy life to the absolute fullest. The other big thing for us is we know that we only have one body, and so we want to take care of it as best as we can. So we're super vigilant at strength training and working out and keeping care of our body, eating healthy, being outside as much as possible. All those things have always been important to us, but after watching our parents be sick and then pass, that became even more of an important factor of our lives. So, shortly after, we came up from grieving, we adopted a dog, we got our dog, and we finally decided to pull the trigger on buying a boat and go fishing, and we went hiking more. So we started doing the things that we hadn't been doing for whatever reason, trying to be outside and trying to just enjoy life a little bit more. I'm big into hobby photography and artsy-fartsy pictures, so as my family calls them. And I get that from my dad. My dad was, he taught me everything I know about photography. My brother's a really good photographer too. So I can't compete with their level, but I can certainly try my little artsy-fartsy stuff.
Hey, we all have our own gifts, and we're all it's not a competition. Do you have since you're mentioning that, I just want to jump in and ask if you have a place, like, is there a website? Do you have an Etsy site? Or do you just do them for yourself?
I just do them for myself and share them on social media.
Okay.
And, eventually we'll get into it, but I have a second website, beyondthegrindlife.com, where we're trying to share more of these types of adventures. It's not a travel blog, it's more of a, trying to live beyond the grind life, and what does that look like? And for us, it looks like taking advantage of the outdoors and doing the things that we love. But yeah.
Okay.
So,
cool. Yeah. Back to your story. I didn't want it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So enjoying. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to fall into complacency where you're just like, oh, I'll do that next weekend, or, we can do that next month or next year. We don't have to do that this holiday. We could do it next holiday. And then it becomes, well, how long? Who knows if there'll be a next?
Right. So, one of the things that, fast forwarding a little bit, so you haven't asked the question, but I will tell you exactly when did things stop being so fine, right? So we did this, we went along and we did this, and then January 2022, Jason was laid off. And, we were expecting it, but we weren't expecting it as early as it happened. Mm-hmm. And so that really gave us we liked the outdoors, we liked to go fishing and hiking and do all this other stuff, but we weren't really doing it. I mean, we made this, initial push, right? Mm-hmm. And then we weren't really doing it. And and we were in Virginia simply for that job. So, after the, crap storm settled a little bit and we kind of were able to digest, okay, this happened, and we weren't really sad about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like he always tells the story. He's like, the next day he felt like the sense of relief. Like I didn't have to deal with what I was dealing with before.
Right. The universe served up what he wasn't able to do himself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we weren't really sad about that change of events. It just, kind of threw us to the side for a little bit. So, but I really started asking some really deep questions about our lives, and, knowing that we had lost 3 parents and 2 grandmothers in a really short period of time. And our grandmothers were incredibly influential in our lives. Like it wasn't just like, they were super influential in who we were as human beings. And so to lose those folks, and then on top of that, I was like, okay, well, I started asking myself the question, well, if I could live anywhere in the world, Where would I stay in Virginia? Would I stay in Richmond, Virginia? And we had just bought our house. We had bought our house February 2020. And it was a beautiful house. It was gorgeous. It was, by every definition, our dream home, like the one that as soon as we saw it, we're like, this is the house. It was on 2.5 acres, a wooded lot. It was gorgeous. It was serene. Our neighbors on either side of us, you couldn't even see the houses. It was absolutely the perfect house for us, and we loved it. But I started asking some really deep questions, and so then we would go for walks several times a day. We'd go out to the end of the lane, because that was basically the only walk we could do in our development. Go out to the end of the lane, which was, a half a mile out and a half mile back. And we'd have these really deep questions about, life. And one of the days I was like, why are we staying here? He's like, well, because we have this house. And I said, okay. I said, we have this beautiful house, but what else? And we couldn't answer that question. And so we just let that sit and marinate. And then I asked the question again, like a month later. I was like, well, why are we staying here? And he's like, I don't know. Like, it changed. And, here's where things weren't fine. So while we had this beautiful house and we, lived in a beautiful part of Virginia, and, it was just okay, but truth of the matter is it was falling short. Like, you start asking questions, well, why don't we go fishing more often? And the answer is, well, it's bass fishing, and we don't really enjoy bass fishing. We prefer cold water fishing. So to go cold water fishing, we had to go further away, which wasn't just an afternoon trip. It became a whole day or a whole weekend trip to be able to accomplish that. Why were we not going hiking more often? Well, because if you've ever been in Virginia in the summer, it's oppressive. It's not hazy. It's not hazy like DC and Harrisburg, where we lived in Pennsylvania, but it's hot and humid. And it's buggy. There's a lot of bugs.
Yep.
And there's a lot of snakes. And there's some poisonous snakes. And I've stepped over several of those going hiking before. So not even realizing, I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
Someone's like, hey, miss, you just stepped over a copperhead. I'm like, oh, okay. And I look back and it was right there.
Did you see it? You saw it was a snake, but you didn't know it was a copperhead? Or you just didn't even see the snake?
I did not even see the snake.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it happened twice. And I was like, my goodness. So you start asking those tough questions. It's like, okay, so we're not going hiking more because it's hot, humid, buggy. The times we've done it, we've not enjoyed it. There have been times where literally we've been like speed walking through the trail because we have a swarm of mosquitoes behind us.
Yeah.
That's not fun for us.
No.
So, we started asking the question, well, where would we, if we could live someplace, where would we live? And what would that look like? And, the other issue that I dealt with was, because I work from home, and I have for a number of years, is the lack of community and the lack of getting to know people. And it's really hard to do when you move to a new area. And it's not that we didn't have friends, but COVID really put a kibosh on a lot of those connections. And, I wasn't going home for the holidays anymore because my dad and my grandmother had passed. And so it was that whole piece of community and what does that look like, now that we've lost our, my folks.
Yeah.
So we started having we got really quiet, at least I did. I can't speak for him, but I got really, really quiet and just sat with these really hard questions for quite a while. And, I was like, I think we need to move. Like, I don't know where, but I think we need to move. Mm-hmm. And just because Virginia was good. It was fine. Right.
It was fine. But it wasn't
fine.
It wasn't really your place.
It wasn't.
Like when you started examining all of the things that you really like to do and the connections that you didn't have.
Yep.
That wasn't your place. I You've always been somebody who's very introspective.
Spective?
Yes, that's the word.
Thank you.
You're a wordsmith too, so you can fill in those words for me. And it seems like you and Jason have a really good relationship where you can talk about all of these things, because I'm betting a lot of people, maybe a lot of people who are listening, like their relationship isn't to the place where they could, like, they may be having these questions, but not being able to have the discussion with their partner.
Yeah. And that I certainly can't advise, on that. We're very lucky. We've worked really, really hard on communication. He was in the Army for 24 years. I was part of that life for 16 of those years. We were geographically separated several times, for deployments or training missions or, wherever they needed him. And so I think that's just something that we're certainly not a perfect couple, but we worked really, really hard to be able to have those communication skills. And then of course we've pretty much always been on the same page about how we want our lives to be. So, I mean, and that happened from dating. So, dating forward, it wasn't, so we've grown together with that and supporting each other with how we wanted our lives to look.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and of course the deeper conversations that come with grief too is, when you're talking about how do you want your life to be from this point forward. So.
Right. And so what conclusions did you come to? Because you're not still in Virginia.
No. We decided to move 2,900 miles across the country again to his home state of Washington. Mm-hmm. So where he grew up, we had been visiting for a number of years, for probably 24, 25 years at that point. And so he has family out here, his siblings and his dad and stepmom and his aunt and uncle. And then, cousins and stuff like that too. So we had a little bit of a community. It's not like we all knew each other very well because we've never lived here.
Yeah.
I mean, he left when he was in his early 20s. So it was before he started dating me. So, so it's been a process of getting to know each other more than just that one day a year where you sit,
right.
over a meal or something like that.
Which is kind of cool. Like, you chose to go there to reestablish a relationship with family that didn't exist. I mean, the family existed, but the relationship didn't really exist.
Sure,
and so,
not on a deep level,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's really cool.
I just, and here's the thing. So we started looking at the things we do enjoy. Obviously the community piece was an important aspect of that. Having holidays or birthdays or, just, being able to go on a hike or go out to dinner, so you had a little bit of that already. You don't want to make any assumptions, but we just kind of like, well, we
sure.
will see
you
them,
have to
right?
start somewhere.
Right. And from there, it was, okay, well, there's cold water fishing, not just lake fishing, but there's stream fishing and saltwater fishing for salmon, which he and I love to do. I am not a passive person in the boat. I am out there fishing with him. I love it. Hiking, you can't find a better place than hiking here. There's no, I don't want to say there's no bugs, but there's not the bugs like there is back in the South.
Right.
And, as far as, poisonous snakes, at least on this side of the mountains, there aren't any. And, so there was so many things to we've always had a very happy and enjoyable experience when we've come out here to visit, as far as the outdoor life goes. And so we just started looking at it more closely. It was like, this just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting to me. And I have a feeling that some people who are listening are going to go, yeah, sure. Okay. That was easy for you because, and start making all the reasons why it wouldn't be easy for them or why they couldn't do it. And it comes down to when you want something badly enough, or when the reasons are strong enough, then the reasons not to fall away.
Yes. Yeah, this was not a light decision. It wasn't like it was a light switch and we were just like, yeah, we're going to move to Washington. I mean, we sat with this decision for I would say probably a good month to 6 weeks before we even told family.
Uh-huh.
And then it was just a few family like, hey, we're thinking about doing this.
Yeah.
And then we sat in Virginia. We sat waiting for jobs, right? So then he stopped applying for jobs in Virginia and started applying for jobs out here. And we sat for probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. I'm starting to lose my time frame, but it was quite a while.
But it was some time.
And so every single day you had that choice of, questioning that decision. And you're absolutely right, Lori. What it comes down to, and maybe this is part of my wiring, but it was a huge leap of faith.
Yeah.
And like you said, the thinking of where you want your life to be and the enjoyable years that you have left, the mobile years that you have left, and how you want that to look. And for me specifically, it wasn't Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all go through this, especially when you get into your 40s and 50s and you're looking at all the things that we just talked about. What is the payoff for waiting? There isn't.
That is the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it's not a light decision. We've since we've known each other, I've moved back and forth across the country. This was our third cross the country move, and everything was for we moved to Tucson to go to school, for him to go to school, and then we moved back to Virginia because that's where the job was. And we were both super excited about being back on the East Coast. It wasn't just me. I mean, he was really excited too. Of course, my dad was still alive then. Mm-hmm. He was just like, oh, this is wonderful. And then to make the decision to move back across the country yet again, to a market that, has more traffic, is higher cost of living, significantly more. I mean, there was just we really weighed this one, but it came down to, what do you want your life to look like? And you don't know, I'm starting to get a little, philosophical here, but no one knows how much longer you have.
No.
Or how many more healthy years you have left.
Right.
So for us, we really just wanted to be able to enjoy life, and to do that, the outdoor element was a huge piece of that, along with community, right?
Right.
But so we just decided, screw it. We're going to take this one more leap of faith and really hope that it works out.
Yes. Well,
it's
okay,
scary
wait.
as crap.
It is scary, and fortunately, I mean, whether you had a partner to do it with, I think makes it a little bit easier. But regardless, it's when you trust and have faith and you take the leap, then you see. And if for some reason in a couple of years you decide that this isn't the place and you want, that's the beauty of living in this country or many other free countries, is that you can choose something different. Right.
And so, it luckily so far we have a house, we have a roof over our head. He has an amazing job that is totally up his geek zone, and he is the happiest he has ever been in, he spends his entire day in schedules and spreadsheets, and he loves it.
Right. Good for him, because that sounds like hell to me.
That is certainly not for me either. But if I have a problem with Excel formula, he can help me.
Right.
He goes much deeper than that. But that is totally up his geek zone, and he didn't even realize a job like that existed. And so we're making it work.
Yeah. So something you just said, as he didn't even know it existed, until you step out of that comfort zone, you don't even know what amazing things are available until you take that leap of faith.
Yeah. You're right. And that's something I hadn't thought of from that perspective. But you're absolutely right. So it does. It takes a big gut, and as you know.
Yeah. And you had to go internally. I mean, we already mentioned about being introspective, but listening to your own inner voice.
Yeah.
And what is it telling you to do? And asking, and it wasn't necessarily just like, hey, move. It was giving you questions to think about, because I think that comes from your inner voice as well. It's not just telling you which direction to go. It's giving you the questions to really think about it and be able to work through the answers to get to the ultimate answer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's getting really quiet. So of course I did a lot of walking, not even listening to a podcast or music, just walking and thinking about things. Or when, we're doing strength training, a lot of times you're in your own zone.
Yeah.
So it was really thinking about, how do I want my life to look like, and where is it falling short, and why am I not taking advantage of the things that I love to do? Why am I not doing more artsy fartsy photos with my fancy dancy camera? Like, why am I not doing that?
Right.
Why am I not strapping on my hiking boots more often? Why are we have this, we saved and saved and saved, and we have this boat, and why are we not using it more often? And we had just bought it. So, it's kind of, but it's all of those things. And then, thankfully we love to travel. Like, we've traveled a lot inside the US. So we had a lot of places where we knew we didn't want to live.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So we had some experience from that perspective of, okay, not that I'd ever lived there, but he was stationed in Louisiana, back in his military days. He was like, we're never moving there.
Right.
So we just knew.
Yeah. And you were making the comment about asking the question, why am I not doing these things? And I think that's a great question. And then the similar question is, why am I not allowing myself to do these things? And that, for a lot of people I've talked to, myself included, it comes back to feeling like you are allowed to, that you're, I don't want to say that you're worthy of taking that time off, but you're not. I mean, what are you doing? It's not time. It's time away from work, maybe, but it's time in your life. Like you said, like, oh, I'm not allowing myself to have my life, basically.
Yeah. And when we started, another good question, I'll share this with you too. Another good question is, of course, I was having heart palpitations and anxiety over this. This was not easy. And I kept saying, well, we love this house, and what if we can't find another house that we like as much? And what if this, and what if this? And it was all the negative stuff. And one of my friends said to me, we were on a Zoom call, and she's like, but what if it does work?
Yes, that is the question that we get so caught up in. What if on the negative side?
Correct.
Instead of what if on the positive? What if everything works out amazing? What if we find a equally fantastic or better house? What if all of these things line up? And like you said, Jason ended up getting a job that was something he didn't even know existed.
Right. And he is so happy. And, his military career, you're on call 24/7. And then his last job, he literally worked 362 days a year, 7 days a week, because he had to do payroll every single day. So even if for his team, and his team fluctuated from 50 employees to a high of like 120 employees during seasonal work. And so even when we were on vacation, he had to log in and do payroll, and he had to log in on Christmas Day and do payroll. And he got the next day off because they were closed on Christmas, So now he has a job that they insist he only work 40 hours a week. And if he has meetings, and he does have meetings, like international meetings that require him to, for a call like at 5:00 at night or whatever for an hour, he just takes an hour off on Friday.
Wow.
And it's like, it's just like night and day. And we just never knew that this world existed. We've never lived this before.
Right. Until you step out in faith, you don't know what the universe could be bringing for you, or what is even out there for you. That's cool. Okay. So now that you've got like extra energy, now that you have all this good stuff in your life, so speaking of energy, what's the hype song? What's the song you listen
Hype
to
song.
when you need an extra boost of energy?
Sure, it's basically anything Foo Fighters, but I'm gonna narrow it down to the Pretenders. So
Okay.
a great song, nice beat.
Yeah.
You know, the lyrics kind of make a lot of sense too. So, but yeah, it's Foo all the way and Dave Grohl.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started recording about Dave Grohl and what a magnificent human he is.
Yes.
And yeah, if you haven't read his book, The Storyteller,
Yep.
highly recommend. We were talking about, we've both read it. Dave Grohl grew up in Northern Virginia.
I also listened to it on Audible, and he narrates it. So I did the splice, right? So I read it,
Yep.
and also listened to it on my walks. And fantastic story.
Yeah. All right. So we'll put a link to your hype song in the show notes. And then if somebody wants to continue the conversation with you, where do they find you?
Yeah, so Tess Wittler, tesswittler.com. And also I have a side little project that I'm working on. It's called Beyond the Grind Life, so beyondthegrindlife.com. And it's basically just talking about similar things to Fine as a 4-letter word,
Yeah.
right? So it's about finding that life and that joy and sharing those stories. We share personal stories, and then eventually I want to share other people's stories about how they're living beyond the grind life.
Yeah, I love that, because that is not really life. I mean, it's some people's life, but it's not anybody's ideal life.
No, and it looks different for everybody, which I think is important to share that too.
Right.
So what works for me, being outside and doing camera stuff is completely different for someone else, and that's completely okay.
Yeah.
But it's still beyond the grind.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm so happy that we reconnected, that you're able to join me on here. And thanks for showing up for Fine is a 4-letter word.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lori. It's been a real joy.